Everyone.
Trying to be.
I was pausing there. All worked out. Before I begin, I did want to relate a story that I learned at NBC on Tuesday, which is a non-violent communication class that we do together. Some of us, most people are from the church that we do. It has to do with Tom is the reason I'm bringing it up. And this was relayed by Cass, who's on Zoom here today, and I got her permission to share it. So I don't know how many people are on Facebook or saw Christine's post, but the night that she suggested on a Monday, I think it was Monday evening when he passed away, that we all meditate for him at 5:50 p.m. And that's just something that she chose arbitrarily, I guess. And we learned from, or Cass learned from one of the children that he passed away at 6 p.m. So, and, I know depending on what your beliefs about that sort of thing is, I just thought that that was interesting and kind of relates to my topic. And also I thought everyone would kind of like to hear that about Tom. So I'm going to talk about transcendental meditation, which is, you may have heard of it, may not have, but it's one form of many types of meditations, of course, and it's one that I practice. And so I'm going to kind of give some of the history and my personal interactions with it, and also some things that I think about as implications from it. You also might hear me say TM instead of transcendental meditation. So if I do that, that's what I'm talking about. So I want to start in February of 1968. 4 young men from in and around Liverpool, England, made their way to Rishikesh in northern India. The purpose of their journey would soon be known around the world, as following these 4 young men, as well as their girlfriends, wives, and various assistants, were a group of reporters and photographers. The purpose of this 4,250-mile journey was one of a spiritual nature. This encounter would spark a period of artistic flourishing for the young men, but it was also not without controversy. Perhaps it needs to be said, perhaps not, that I'm speaking about one of the most popular and successful bands of all time, the Beatles. They had made this trip to see Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who they had met 6 months before in London at the Hilton Hotel. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, whose life's work was to revive and demystify the timeless knowledge of meditation and verify its effectiveness through the lens of modern science, began teaching transcendental meditation in the 1950s. Wikipedia even will tell you that he is the creator of the technique, although this statement conflicts with Maharishi himself. He did not claim to invent a new concept, but rather to have developed, repackaged, and introduced the specific technique of transcendental meditation to the world in the mid-50s. He presented it as a simple, natural technique derived from ancient Vedic traditions, learned from his master, Brahmananda Saraswati. After refining and systemizing the teaching of TM, Maharishi began a movement to make the technique available worldwide. He oversaw the training of thousands of teachers and established a nonprofit foundation to preserve the authenticity of the TM technique for generations to come. And now I'm going to read a few blurbs from the New York Times. There was an article that they published in 2008 in which announced his death. And this is what they had to say. Mahesh Prasad Varma, which was his given name, he was born near the central Indian town of Jabalpur into a scribe caste family. Called Mahesh, he studied physics at Allahabad University, and for the next 13 years became a student and secretary to a holy man, Swami Ramananda Saraswati, who the young disciple Mahesh called Guru Dev. After the death of his master in 1953, Mahesh went into seclusion in the Himalayan foothills. He emerged 2 years later and began teaching a system of belief which grew into the worldwide TM movement. His critics called his organization a cult business enterprise. And in the press in the 60s and 70s, he was often dismissed as a hippie mystic. He was called the giggling guru, recognizable in the familiar image of him, laughing, sitting cross-legged in a lotus position on a deerskin, wearing a white silk dhoti with a garland of flowers around his neck beneath an oily, scraggly beard. And that's the New York Times article. Transcendental meditation comes out of the Advaita Vedanta tradition. This is an ancient Hindu philosophy. Its core tenet is that the individual experiencing self is ultimately pure awareness, mistakenly identified with the body and its senses. In TM, you will hear it said by its leader that consciousness is all there is. This belief that consciousness is all there is certainly not a requirement of learning or practicing transcendental meditation. TM is the experimental application of the philosophical idealist insight that the physical world is not the ultimate reality. It provides a means to transcend the everyday mind-constructed world of appearances or phenomena to the experience, the underlying unified reality, pure consciousness. It is certainly more important and beneficial to the individual to practice meditation than to contemplate the nature of existence. I want to make this clear as to not conflate TM with philosophy. One could simply practice TM for a lifetime and never give philosophy a second thought if that is the desire of the individual. And that is where I will leave that thought for the moment. Towards the end of this talk, I want to return to it briefly. Expansion of happiness is the purpose of life. This quote by Maharishi defines in many ways the foundation of the technique of TM itself, as well as one of the benefits that many of its practitioners have experienced over the 70 years of its existence. I will describe my own experience, which, while anecdotal, is one that will have familiar sentimentalities with the millions of others who have practiced TM. I'm not quite sure where I first heard of the practice. I was aware of people in popular culture mentioning practicing it. I'll give some of the names, and I think that this list comes from their website themselves. But in doing so, I merely want to highlight the popularity of TM. I in no way subscribe to the idea necessarily that celebrity has some special endorsement. Some of the names that they give are David Lynch, Jerry Seinfeld, Oprah Winfrey, of course the Beatles, Hugh Jackman, Clint Eastwood, Mick Jagger, Sheryl Crow, Ellen DeGeneres, Cameron Diaz, Tom Hanks, and Jennifer Lopez. About all I knew at the time was that TM was supposed to be easy to do, could be done anywhere, and would be effective for relieving stress and other benefits if practiced regularly. Benefits like increased energy, clearer thinking, deep relaxation, a significant reduction in stress, anxiety, and blood pressure, increased creativity, enhancing brain function and improving sleep, long-term emotional balance, cardiovascular health, and better overall quality of life. I also was aware that one of the ideas behind transcendental meditation was that it exposed one to higher states of consciousness. It was with this hope that I reached out via their website to connect with the local TM center in Nashville. For those within aversion to Nashville traffic, there is another center in Huntsville, Alabama. Once I connected with a local teacher, I went to Nashville for my initial introduction. The first session of the course involved meeting the instructor, having a brief conversation, an explanation, and then a short ceremony follows. You are given a mantra that is to be used when you meditate. This mantra is a word that will have no meaning, and this is by design. It is not meant to be a distraction to the practice of meditation itself. To practice TM in its proper way, you meditate in the morning for 20 minutes, and then in the evening for 20 minutes. After each meditation, you are advised to remain with your eyes closed for at least 2 minutes as you slowly come out of the meditation. There are 3 other check-ins with your instructor, which can be done in person or online. These happen over successive days. Over those several days, you will be given access to an app which has course material, which are videos and reading, that provides additional information. Once you have completed the course, the app will open up a library of resources, optional material that will help with a lot of the questions that might come up while acclimating to the practice. And pretty much with that, you're on your way. The instructor is always available to you. There are typically monthly check-ins in person and online if one wants to connect with others for group meditation and bring any questions or issues that might have presented themselves. There's even an option to do group meditations via the app. Of course, it's the nature of the human mind to want to know the reasons for procedures and why we do it this way or that way. To that end, there will be explanations provided for why thoughts occur during meditation, which I think that one is probably one of the biggest hindrances to people who do meditation, because they think that the thoughts that they're having are, they're not doing it correctly. And what you learn in TM anyway is that thoughts are perfectly normal, and actually, they're going to happen and they're expected. Also, why one shouldn't be concerned and why one shouldn't be concerned with it. Why it's necessary to do this twice a day for 20 minutes. How is the mind transcending, and what does that even mean? What exactly is meant by transcendental meditation? How does the mind reach higher states of consciousness? What happens during those initial 4 days? All of those answers will be provided to satisfy the natural scientific curiosity that we all have. The answer to those questions is important to receive as to not hinder the mind in accepting the instructions. I've chosen not to focus on those topics because I think it's best that trained facilitators and course material provide those answers. This alleviates my interference and any likely confusion that would result if I were to delve into those sorts of things. It also protects the innocence and the integrity of the practice and ensures that those that come to do it do so without any false information. It is also the desire and wish of teachers and the organization itself that those questions be answered by them. I can, however, report on my experience with practicing TM. I've been practicing TM meditation since September 15th of last year. And I cannot overstate how life-changing it has been for me. The often repeated benefits of practitioners have also been my own. Better sleep, more energy, greater clarity of mind, more confidence, more peace of mind, greater acceptance of life in general, a reduction in anxiety, and more. I've also been able to have greater control over bad habits and have a much more positive outlook. I have more joy and gratitude. I also have come to realize that these positive outcomes are not just the result of meditation, although that is how I arrived to experience them. They are truly what it is to fully live the human experience. That is not to say that all of one's problems vanish and life is unicorns and rainbows. Problems still exist, bad days still happen, negative thoughts still occur, people still cut you off in traffic. The difference is the reaction. And even if I get angry, I am more forgiving and can much more easily get myself back on track. I can see progression. And just as with most things in life, positive reinforcement carries momentum that can trend towards greater outcomes. There are less lows and more highs. One of the things that TM has also provided is an even greater desire to know more about the nature of reality. I found myself being more accepting of what could be called spirituality. Since April of 2025, I've been part of an Edgar Cayce study group called A Search for God. Edgar Cayce's life and abilities are well known to many. His story is certainly a whole other topic, and it isn't my intention to get into that story. To briefly explain what the study entails is relevant, however. In 1931, Edgar Cayce began to give a series of readings that outlined individual steps towards true spiritual growth. A group of people working on understanding these concepts, practicing them, and writing about their experiences worked with Edgar Cayce to put these concepts into lessons published as A Search for God, Books 1 and 2. This is the subject matter used in the groups that still form today. I mention this because as someone who once considered themselves to be an atheist and a materialist, it's funny how things can shift. I still don't have an issue with identifying as an atheist at some level. As Richard Dawkins once said, quote, "I have found it an amusing strategy when asked whether I am an atheist, to point out that the questioner is also an atheist when considering Zeus, Apollo, Amun-Ra, Mithras, Baal, Thor, Vulcan, the golden calf, and the flying spaghetti monster. I just go one god further," end quote. My feelings on the existence of God now are that it's likely one of the greatest misunderstandings in human thought. And I would consider myself an atheist of the concept of a bearded man who judges humanity as depicted in Christianity. But I no longer consider myself a materialist, and also consider myself to be a spiritual person, and maybe even a mystic as I understand the term. I find my connection to the divine and the spiritual to be much more present since meditation. That isn't to say that is the experience of others who do meditation team. I speak only for myself. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christianity, and I do see ideas in Christianity in a much different light now. The Christ consciousness is something mentioned a lot in Edgar Cayce's study group. He himself was a devout Christian, but his readings when he was asleep were not at all congruent with traditional Christianity. Jesus speaks of connecting with the kingdom of God. I see the kingdom of God as the mind connecting with consciousness from which it came. Jesus is called the Logos. The Logos is the fundamental rational principle, cosmic order, or universal consciousness structuring reality. It acts as the bridge between divine intellect and human thought, enabling comprehension of the universe. In Stoicism, it is the active material force in nature, while in Christianity, it is the divine word made flesh. All of this is related to what many just call manifesting. We know that science is discussing what is called a unified field theory. This is a theoretical framework in physics aiming to describe all fundamental forces of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong weak nuclear forces, as aspects of a single fundamental field. The major difficulty lies in reconciling quantum mechanics, which deals with discrete probabilistic particles, with general relativity, which describes smooth deterministic spacetime. The smallest particles, like quarks, electrons, and photons, exhibit wave-particle duality, acting as both waves and particles depending on how they are observed. An observer is needed for the particles to collapse and decide what to become. So we have a process here. We have an observer, the process of observing, and the thing observed. This process presents challenges to materialism and opens the door for science to begin to understand the nature of reality in other possible ways. A few things from Tony Nader, who is the current leader of the Transcendental Meditation movement. Quote, "During transcendental meditation, the mind moves inward through quieter states of the thought and then transcends, going beyond the thought to pure consciousness itself. As modern physics has probed finer levels of the physical world, it has discovered that at the deepest level, there is no physical world at all. No material objects, not even atoms and subatomic particles, but only abstract, non-physical fields, all apparently emerging from a single unified field. This experience, however long or brief during meditation, is transcending beyond our waking state of awareness. During this experience, one's attention goes beyond the boundaries of thought and perception. In those moments, you are aware of your true self. One of the last things that I wanted to share is from 1977. And this quote is from Philip Dick, who is a science fiction writer. And he said this at the Second International Science Fiction Festival in France. And it is about the nature of an idea in the mind. And so everything I'm about to say is that quote, and then I'll be done. His quote is, once the idea has emerged or appeared or been born, however it is that new ideas pass over into being, the individual says to himself, but of course, why didn't I realize that years ago? But note the word realize, it is the key word. He has come across something new that at the same time was there somewhere all the time. In truth, it simply surfaced. It always was. He did not invent it or even find it. In a very real sense, it found him. And that is a little frightening to contemplate. He has not invented it, but on the contrary, it invented him. It is as if the idea created him for its purposes. I think this is why we discover a startling phenomenon of great renown. That quite often in history, a great new idea strikes a number of researchers or thinkers at exactly the same time. All of them oblivious to their compeers. Its time had come, we say about the idea, and so dismiss, as if we had explained it, something I consider quite important. Our recognition that in a certain literal sense, ideas are alive. What does this mean? To say that an idea or a thought is literally alive, and that it seizes on men here and there and makes use of them to actualize itself into the stream of human history. Perhaps the pre-Socratic philosophers were correct. The cosmos is one vast entity that thinks.